Welcome to Counterpoint, an APA podcast. We are three ordinary men who love God, God's Word, our families, the church, and our country. In this podcast, we seek to bring a reformed, biblically faithful perspective to social and political issues in Australia. The Association for Reformed Political Action, also known as APA, is an Australian organisation which aims to keep you informed about social and political issues in Australia and encourage a Christian voice in the public square. Hello everyone, thanks for joining us again. It's another month, so we have another current events episode lined up for you. And today, we've got the whole crew back. So I'm Nathan and Ben's next to me, like always, and welcome back, Sean.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. It's been a while.
Glad to have you back, Sean.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I've missed a few. I've missed you guys. But everybody's happy and healthy, so it's good.
Yes, I think all of our families are happy and healthy, aren't they?
Yes.
Indeed. Okay, now we forgot last time, but we want to restore the tradition of reading a Bible text as we start this episode. So today we'll have a look at Matthew 28, verse 18 to 20. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." So yeah, some encouragement there. Christ, who is our King, has been given all authority. He is with us. And then his command is that we spread the gospel, proclaim the truth to all nations, and teach them to observe all that he has commanded us.
He's the King. He is definitely our King, for sure.
Yeah.
But he's the King of Kings. So.
True. Yep. Yeah, and that's what we're seeking to do in this podcast. Encourage God's people to proclaim the gospel and to teach all the nations to observe what the King has commanded us.
Yes.
Now, before we move on to the three topics, I just have a quick update on the ISIS brides, which we looked at a few months ago. Now, 4 of them returned a few weeks ago, of which 3 were immediately arrested in the airport. Just the mothers, not the children, from what I understand. Now, 2 of them are on slavery charges, which I think is quite unique in Australia. I don't think we've ever had to use that law.
Yeah, that would be, really interesting. Yep.
And then, one of them for joining a terrorist organisation. And the last week, the Australian was reporting that there are 6 more on the way to Australia. So we might see some more arrests. The Prime Minister said, as you may remember from last time, he said that they've made their bed, they should sleep in it.
Yep.
That doesn't seem to be happening.
Well, I'm just happy that at least they are making arrests when they come back here. So should they be coming back? That is definitely a question that we spoke about last time. But, at least they're not letting them just walk in and become citizens again on the dole. So, anyway.
Well, they're on the dole, just in prison.
I understand. I know. But
$300,000 a year, I think, it costs to maintain a prisoner. So, yeah, that's expensive. But I think more what we see here is when something blows up in the media and the government gets criticised, they'll just deflect and say things to keep people happy. But then a few months later, when the focus has shifted, then we'll just quietly bring them in anyway. Okay, and then the news items. So we go to the meat of this episode. To start off with, Sean will look at Tickle versus Giggle. So yes, it was a bit of a laughable situation.
Yes. The Lord does have a sense of humour.
Yes. Ben will have a look at the Equal Opportunity Act in WA and what changes may or may not be coming. And then I'll have a look at childcare, which promises to be interesting as well. So Sean, let's get going.
Yeah. So this lady, Sal Grover, started this app called Giggle for Girls in 2019. And it was aimed at women only, a social networking platform. And then in 2021, this guy, Mr. Tickle, we'll just call him, downloaded the app and tried to use it, but he identifies as a woman. So he signed up, and the way you sign up is you have to upload a selfie to the app, and then they used a like AI software to look at the selfie and try and determine if you're a man or a woman, just to verify, to try and keep the platform women only. Anyways, he was able to use the app for about 8 months, and then Sal Grover, the owner of the company, does manual reviews as well of the selfies to ensure that nothing or no one has gotten past the AI facial recognition software. And Mr. Tickle was one of the profiles that she ended up blocking by just going through the photos and doing like a quick visual assessment. So a couple of months later, Mr. Tickle realizes that he can't use the app anymore, so he contacts them and asks some questions, but there's not a lot of traction. And as happens a lot of time with these transgender individuals, they immediately go to, not immediately, but go up pretty high, go to the Human Rights Commission for alleging discrimination. And then over time brings a court case in the federal court against Giggle for Girls, but then obviously Sal Grover, the owner of the company. And initially the court case, they filed proceedings 22, and then mid-24 there was an initial ruling made, or judgment made in the federal court, and found that there was indirect discrimination on the basis of gender identity by Sal Grover, by the app, essentially, or the company, against this guy, and they awarded damages as well. One of the sad moments, I guess, in the case is in the ruling, where the judge just said that he ruled that sex is not mutable, so sex is not mutable, and that the court was just interpreting the legal or ordinary meaning of sex under the Sex Discrimination Act and not making a biological claim. It's not his role to engage with evolutionary or biological definitions of sex. So that's just an amazing statement to make, and we spoke about this.
Did he say sex is mutable or is not?
Sex is not mutable. It's not a mutable characteristic. So this is what we were talking about just before we started recording, is that around this time, so around 2020, 2021, in the US at least, there was some people that noticed that there was this switch in language happening, where before it was sex is mutable, but gender identity isn't. And then around that time, around 2020, 2021, there was the switch that happened where the people that are in favor of this gender identity nonsense started swapping in the word sex for gender identity. And that's what this judge has done here, is he's saying, according to the Sex Discrimination Act of 1984 in Australia, sex is not a mutable characteristic and can be changed.
Okay.
Which is a pretty serious statement, because now it's not just what's going on in your head can change. Now it's actually your physical body, your actual sex can also change depending on the day of the week. All right, so then Sal Grover, the owner of the company, then made an appeal to the full federal court. And that's what was, that they made a ruling 2 weeks ago on this. And now they actually awarded even higher damages to this guy. And they found direct discrimination under the Act, where previously it was indirect. So that's now even more serious. They awarded $20,000 in damages plus legal fees capped at $100,000, which is quite an astonishing amount. And Sal Grover, the owner of the company, she may now appeal to the High Court of Australia.
If they allow her.
Yeah, if they allow her. So that may not be possible, but she's obviously going to try. So this is not a funny case, not for her anyways, and it shows that we are, even in our legal system where there should be a strong sense of right and wrong, here we are, dancing in the grey area quite clearly. But one of the things that does stand out here is that it is ironic that part of the feminist and liberal egalitarian push in the mid-20th century was to try and get rid of all these single-sex spaces, as this lady calls it. There was a woman-only space where they could be safe. But now it's ironic that one of the main aims was to try and get rid of all these single-sex spaces, which was mostly male only, because it was for
Clubs.
social, but also networking for business purposes and so on. But that excluded women in advancement of their career or that sort of stuff. So they disbanded that. And now that you've had your feminist cake, you don't want to eat it. So even though I don't agree with the court's ruling here, it is a bit of a funny moment where this lady tried to exclude men from her app and have it women only, but that actually goes exactly against the Sex Discrimination Act. So even this guy shouldn't be pretending to be a woman to get into this space. The Sex Discrimination Act actually makes it so that you can't do these things. You actually can't have single-sex spaces at all. There's this very narrow way of getting that done in today's society. If you have an historical place, it's probably easier. But if you want to try and set up something new, it's near impossible because you're excluding, well, the other sex, who, whichever way you go with that.
It's a bit of the snake kind of eating itself, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those, let's say, unintended consequences that you could have seen coming, 50 years ago already, or 40 years ago when they drew up this act initially. But it does tie in with a lot of what we have, not just in Australia, but in the West generally, where you have this exclusion or discrimination or whatever you want to call it. Any sort of segregation is illegal. If I segregate, if I make it my club, that it's men only and we get together and have a whiskey and a cigar. Now, you can't have the cigar anyways in Australia, but let's say you wanted to do that. Legally, you couldn't do it anyway. And it's just because you're trying to do a single-sex space. So, again, I don't agree with the court's decision here. I think it's unjust and it's stupid. But unfortunately, this is the natural consequence of having a law like that or an act like that where you outlaw all segregation of all kinds. So there is bad ways to segregate, and then there are ways that are just perfectly fine. And this app, for instance, is perfectly fine. If I can't set up Boy Scouts here in Western Australia and exclude girls from joining and not allow women to lead, then you can't have your app either.
Yep.
Isn't the point more about whether or not someone identifies as a man or a woman and whether or not they're allowed to join the app?
Yeah,
I thought that was the bigger issue here.
Yeah, in this case, that is the point. Of
so he wanted to join the app, but he's identifying as a woman, right?
Yeah.
But because he clearly isn't a woman, he's not allowed to join because it's for women only.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point, is he's saying, I am a woman, and now you've discriminated against me for not joining your app, or you're calling me a man.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
and I think a lot of the blame in terms of legislation actually comes down to changes made to the Sex Discrimination Act by the Gillard government. I think this was in the early 2010s. And those are the changes that Angus Taylor, now leader of the coalition, is promising to repeal.
Yeah.
So the coalition and, of course, One Nation and other conservative parties, their policies are that you should restore biological definitions of sex in the Sex Discrimination Act.
Can I just say this is very exciting to me? Way to go, Mr. Taylor. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent work.
Oh, yeah. As a segue, he's doing pretty well. It's just a question of whether or not he's trying to rescue a sinking ship. But yeah, that's a segue.
Yeah, but I think it's good that he's at least speaking out strongly against this.
Yeah.
And has some sort of plan of what he wants to do about it. He's going to have to follow through, and if he does manage to do that, and even with the appointment of Tony Abbott now recently as well as the leader of the party outside of Parliament, those are all good signs that maybe the party is recognizing that this road that they've been going down wasn't probably not what they should have been doing.
It's going off a cliff.
Yeah.
Eject.
So hopefully this is the eject that's happening. They're rejecting the bad policies and the bad ideas. And anyway, but yeah, I think this whole case just shows again that you can't, there's many problems here. So obviously the whole thing around sex and gender is a problem. But maybe even for us in the church, we need to just rethink the way we think about these sorts of things, this sort of segregation. And again, when I say that word, I know what everybody's thinking is brown people and white people on the other side of the fence, just the opposite side of the fence. Just get past that. Just look past that. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is we can have, if you really want to have the idea of freedom of association, which is a Christian principle, then you can't have that unless you have some sort of segregation, meaning that if I'm free to associate with whoever I want, that means that the people that I don't want to associate with are segregated from me, or I'm discriminating against them in some way. And we just need to develop a strong enough constitution that, I mean, personally, our own constitution, that we can actually handle that and just say, well, I don't care if that offends you, you're not allowed here.
Yeah, I'd say in our society, we still have a situation where most of the time it's fine to do these sorts of things. It's not like we have people knocking on our door because we have a women's club and a men's club in our churches or Bible study groups. So it's just, it's one of those things where it's more when it gets media attention and you realize how bad the law really is.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that if a normal, just guy who's not, he's not trying to play act like he's a woman, tried to access this app and was rejected, you probably would have read about this, but then it would have been in a way different light. I mean, then everybody would be defending this lady, saying, this guy should actually be sued into the ground for even trying to access a woman's space and making it unsafe, blah, 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 all these sorts of things. Where now we have the same guy, just with long hair, and saying, I'm a girl, now he's the one that gets sided with. So they're at that time in history now where that's allowed, right? It's just, they're the protected class. And that's the only reason you would have heard about this, was because of the transgenderism thing. Anyway.
Yeah. Carl Stefanovich, on his show, he had an interview with Selgraver last week. And she said, look, there's thousands of men who ended up getting rejected.
Yeah.
And she's not actually the only one who filters them. They've got a group of women who are involved with that.
Yeah.
So uncontroversial. I think, as Christians, this just reinforces that the very controversial statement, which shouldn't be controversial, men are men, women are women, is the truth, and we should proclaim it.
Yep.
It's simple and it's true. And for a bit of silver lining as we move on to what Ben's saying, I think this has revealed in, I guess you could say, the public consciousness, just how bad the law is and the fact that it needs fixing.
Yep.
So I think the public will be reacting pretty strongly against what's happened here.
Yes.
Okay, Ben, Equal Opportunity Act. And I'm just reading what you've got written here at first. And the year 1984 is popping up a lot. It's just like, did George Orwell have some premonitions or something?
Yes. So I will be dealing with the Equal Opportunity Act 1984, which is a Western Australia Act, and it is on the slate to get replaced. Now, the Cook government, so our current WA government, committed to introduce a new act in 2026, but there is no bill for that yet. If you remember, possibly a few years ago, there was a bit of noise about a couple of recommendations that came from a group called the Law Reform Commission in 2022, reviewing the laws of the land. And they came back at that time with a final report with 163 different recommendations. And that's when you probably would have heard of this for the first time round, when there was some noise about it at the school and changes to what is allowed in terms of defining the requirements for the roles of staff at schools or other institutions. Now, at the moment, in the Equal Opportunity Act, there's a religious exemption, which is just a blanket exemption, section 72 and 73. And that is getting looked at. So what's happening here is, just to bring you up to speed if you forget what this was about, is that the recommendation put forward is that schools after this change would only be able to apply faith criteria to staff where faith conformity is an inherent requirement of that specific role. So to quote from the recommendation, this exception is limited to the employment of staff and the appointment of commission agents and contract workers if 1. Conformity with the doctrines, beliefs, or principles of the religion is an inherent requirement of the job. 2. The person cannot meet that inherent requirement because of their religious conviction. And 3. The discrimination is reasonable and proportionate in the circumstances. So basically this would mean is that you can hire a religious teacher who is religious, a Reformed Christian, to teach religious studies, but you cannot discriminate based on religion if you're hiring a math teacher or a science teacher. So that's the foundational recommendation. That's the biggest one. That's up for changing. There's a couple other changes recommended as well, which are the sexual orientation and gender identity can no longer be grounds for any employment decision. Secondly, the burden of proof reverses. So a prima facie case is made by the office of the government. The school has to disprove discrimination.
So guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, that is just...
Yeah.
And this is not the only case where this is coming into law.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. I think the hate crimes bill also has this.
Yep. Anybody who's a lawyer knows that is a much harder case to make if you have to disprove rather than prove.
And it completely undermines the Western justice system, which was built on innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
So that's another big change in the recommendations as well. And the other one is the commissioner gets investigative power as an own motion. So there's no complaint that's actually needed to trigger investigation. So if you've watched kind of in Canada and Australia around the world, most of these laws tend to be weaponized by activists who will bring forward different cases. They'll try and blow something up. But in this case, that can happen. That can also happen where an activist takes a case like this to court. But the commissioner actually has the power without no one has actually been wronged. They can still just take action based on what they believe has been wrong. This, again, is another kind of violation of what I would say is the Western liberal legal tradition, which is that the government is never to sit as the judge in its own case. It's never a good idea to sit in the judge of your own case. You need to sit as a judge between two other parties. And so that principle is getting violated here as well. Or the recommendation is that they would change that.
Well, the other part of it is, again, the guilty until proven innocent sort of view, even in this, right? So the commissioner, on their own, can decide that they want to start investigating this school or that institution. And that's just, anyway, that goes beyond God's role for the government. So it's
it's just not very good practice. So, and so there's a couple of other changes as well. Yeah, so this is not actually law. This is not even a draft law. This is recommendations. However,
hold on. You wrote something good in here. The one thing that is good, though, is that it says here conversion practices will become banned coming in 2026. So does that mean they're going to shut down all the gender clinics?
That is a tangent.
Yes, unfortunately, the conversion practices ban is coming separately. So that references the conversion therapy law, which they're also considering, which has to do with people counseling, especially pastors or other teachers or elders, counseling young people on whether or not they should become gay or not.
Hopefully they put something in there for psychologists talking kids into it or people into it.
Yeah.
Hopefully that goes in there as well.
Yeah, and hopefully
Probably
maybe,
not, but
Don't hold your breath.
yeah.
maybe some Twitch streamers as well.
Yes. Yes.
No, that's a different conversation.
Yep. Carry on.
But yeah, so this is recommendation at this point. The key is that the Cook government has made the promise that this is coming down the pipe this year, and because they have majority, it's very unlikely that if the government already has put in principle support behind this recommendation list. So once basically it seems to be that it's just a matter of the paperwork that they get this finalized, and then they would basically rubber stamp it. So this is kind of the last stage that we have before, like by the time the bill comes around, it really is getting very late in the game to change something like this. So the recommendation from ARPA, from us here, would really be that we bring these things before God in prayer. We need to recognize that these things are in His hand, but we need to remember that, we are citizens of this country, and to the extent that we bring matters like this before God, He is the King. He is the only King out of all the world, and He has the power to guide and direct these things. And prayer is a powerful force. So I would encourage you to keep this matter before God. The key prayer point is really that we need to pray that, especially the Attorney General, Tony Booty, would receive good advice regarding these recommendations, and that also he would receive the strength to be able to modify or deny a number of the worst ones. He is a Catholic man, and he is a man of faith. He understands some of the queries and uncertainties that a bunch of the faith communities have regarding these changes. And the real prayer is that he would act on that he would have the courage to stand up against his own party, and together with his office and with the others who are drafting this legislation, that they would make good decisions regarding which recommendations they accept.
I guess one concern from my side is just, and we've seen this happen a lot over the last few years, is you have these new bills coming down the line. Some of the changes that are being proposed here are not small and have quite a serious effect on a large portion of society. So we obviously thinking of Christians, as we should, and for the good of society. But there's also an increasing Muslim population here in WA that will also not be in favour of a lot of the changes that are being proposed here, right? Because it'll affect their schools, their mosques and all these sorts of things. Again, I'm not in favour of all those things, but just this is the reality we live in today. And that we're halfway through 2026. We've seen no bill yet, and they're just going to try and rubber stamp it. And something like this should be debated, surely, to get to the right outcome for the people under you. But this whole thing of just basically pushing it through is just so unrighteous. It's it's just not good.
Yep. So pray about these things, bring them before God. The second thing I would really encourage, if anyone has the purview of reviewing employment contracts and position descriptions or offer letters for different positions, it would be really good for us just to ensure that what we believe is inherent in all of those positions. So we need to review, we believe the fact that our faith affects all of life, right? But we just need to work that out. We need to think about, okay, how does this actually affect the role of a math teacher, right? How does it really, in words that you could put in an employment contract, actually change their behavior, right? Because the thing is, we believe that, right? That is the truth. Right. The foundational truth about the world is that God made it, and you need to acknowledge that fact and all of its the entails of that fact at every point throughout your life, throughout your educational process. Yep. And so we just need to work on articulating that and documenting that and making it true that it is actually it's just a fact of life that you cannot actually do this job if you do not believe that that God is real, that he sent his son Jesus Christ, and that he rose from the dead. That those positions need to become real and get written down. So yeah, we need to be thinking about that.
I'm just thinking on that, the verse, Matthew 10:16. I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And I think when we write our job descriptions and employment contracts and all that stuff, we need to be like that, where you need to find a way and write the job description in such a way that is not untrue, but things that we didn't believe we needed to state up until now.
Exactly.
And now we just need to do it.
Yeah.
That's all. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared to say that mathematics is impossible outside of the existence of the triune God. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
So therefore, you cannot be a Christian and you cannot be a math teacher in our school if you don't believe that.
Yeah.
So,
and the thing is, this is not, I haven't myself articulated that very well, but this is work that needs to be done. This is something that we need to be drawing attention to, and it's definitely doable. Like, this is totally doable.
Yep.
Because you see in other areas how when you do leave the truth of God, then 2 + 2 does start equaling 5. So
Oh, not just that. Maths is racist.
yes,
yeah.
all that kind of stuff, right? So
Yeah. So even mathematics, which I think is the most objective learning area,
Even there, yeah.
the accusations are still there.
Yeah, so we can do both, right? We need to write the contracts in a way that we can get past this bill if it passes, and then also speak to the government and to the commissioner and make to them clear our position and why they shouldn't make these changes, etc. We should do both.
Yep. And I think I went to a meeting about this earlier this year. It was basically run by Nick Oran and Marika Grunewald, so 2 members of Parliament in WA. And they said that this legislation probably won't affect who you hire as much, because you just say, look, you're the best candidate for the job. It's more about if someone's, let's say their religion or their practices change while they're in employment, and then they get fired because of it. So let's say someone turns homosexual and then the school fires them. That's when you could come into real issues.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for our schools, by this I mean the John Calvin schools, which are affiliated with the Free Reformed churches and exclusive to the Free Reformed churches, it's actually going to be a bit easier for a school like that, because you can just tie employment into membership of a particular church, in which case you're not discriminating on that basis at all.
Yeah.
It's just based on church membership. And that's something that John Steenhoff from Human Rights Law Alliance pointed out a few years ago as well.
Yeah.
As an aside, if you want help with how to put together a good employment contract, Human Rights Law Alliance is a good place to go.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we should move on. Ben, did you have something more to say? You did look like you did.
Yeah, just the last thing there. We do encourage submissions. The people to talk to are the Attorney General, who's Tony Booty, and he's in and around Armadale.
Yeah.
Definitely get his email, sit down for a coffee with him, bring these things to his attention. And the other one is possibly as a school as well. It might be worth reaching out to ASWA. I'm not sure 100% on that, but it would just be good as schools, as churches, as individuals, the more different ways that we can hit this, the better. So if you have any questions about that, any ways that you would like to have advice around that, then definitely reach out to ARPA. That's arpacounterpoint@gmail.com. And yeah, we can help with that. Also, the last thing is just regarding for parents, for elders and teachers, we just need to be increasingly involved and vigilant around our teens, especially. So as a parent, you need to know what's going on in your child's life. As Nathan was saying, the real risk factor for us is this radicalization vector, where someone is online and they start watching, they get hooked on the wrong TikTok channel, and yeah, things go south from there. We need to know, as a parent, you need to care, you need to love, you need to take the time to see what's going on in your child's life. You need to walk the journey with them, and you need to, be there way before this becomes an issue. And same thing for teachers and for elders. Like, encourage and continue to support your parents in being able to do that. This is the number one priority. So,
Very important.
Yeah. And as we've been talking about a lot when we've been going through family, now that a few episodes are released, we can actually say we have talked about this. Real relationships are very important, especially over the fake relationships that come through social media. And that is a very good segue into the next topic, childcare. Now, one of the features of the recently announced budget, maybe next time we'll talk about the budget more, we'll see, is that the government has committed to fully subsidising 3 days of childcare for anyone who's eligible. I think eligibility has to do with whether or not you're living with a child, whether you're poor enough in a sense or you're not too wealthy. Although I think that might have been taken out actually. I think the means testing is gone. So anyone can access this. And yeah, this subsidy, it gets paid to the childcare provider. So there's a bit of red tape involved and administration, which is never good. It'd be much easier just to pay it to the mother. And this is part of our Prime Minister, and you could say his government too, but the Prime Minister has been very vocal about this. He's really pushing for universal childcare. He said last year when announcing these measures, they were actually passed earlier this year, he said that he wants children to have the best upbringing possible. Now, presumably he thinks that institutionalised childcare is the way to go about this. It's the best upbringing for children. And for those of you who are getting Marxist vibes, yeah, I am too.
So am I.
Yep, basically the idea that the government should be raising children and not the families. So not only is this a $22 billion, which is estimated, it's probably going to be more, black hole in the budget, biblical principles and also evidence and a current crisis in the childcare system suggests that perhaps the Prime Minister is dreaming.
So you're assuming that he's aiming for the same thing that you are when he says that the best education possible. But you're probably not thinking of the same thing outcome-wise. So it's yeah, anyway. It's one of those things where I
don't be too cynical, Sean.
yeah.
We assume the best until proven otherwise.
Yeah. Well,
I think we have been proven otherwise already, or they have been anyways.
Yeah. I don't think it's a good idea to presume motive, and you don't have to talk about the damage that this would do. Even if it's done with good intentions, it doesn't change how much harm is being done.
I think it does come down to what we have said maybe a few times in the past on this podcast, is they are clearly not identifying the actual problem, and the outcome that they're aiming for is not the same as what you are aiming for. They're aiming for something completely different. So they are writing bills or coming up with budgets that are going in the direction which they are actually intending to go, which is this flattened out world, this feminist world where everybody should be working and mom should be given the opportunity to further her career. And this is still the best way to do it, because at the moment with the affordability problems we have in the country, that has actually, this whole thing about both working has actually helped that along, made it worse.
Yeah.
Dad needs to work, but mom needs an opportunity too. And now the kids, someone else just needs to do it. And this is the best way. Why not daddy government? They can do it. Who better to look after your children than some sort of professional?
Yeah.
They've had some professional training. You've only had children. Well, that doesn't qualify you for anything.
It's a credentialism of the time.
Yeah, and we've heard those statements actually out in public in the last year or two.
And I think that's what he means when he says that this is the best upbringing possible, is that professionals that know best bring up your children and from the cradle up.
Yeah.
So that way they will become the absolute best citizens and the best workers and the best whatever else he has in mind. So he's not making a mistake here. He's doing the thing. He's doing things that are driving towards the goal that he has in mind. So this is not an accident. It's not a. This is what he's aiming at, and this is the way to get there.
And the underlying belief is actually that everybody has one job, one very specific, extremely narrow job, and they do not do anything else.
Yep.
And so if you happen to have kids while your job is actually software development, well, you have to give your kids off to someone who's trained to train the kids.
Yep.
Right.
Because you only know how to do software development. You don't know how to raise children.
Apparently not. Well, yeah, this discussion about professionals is actually a really good segue into the crisis. And I'm going to read a little bit from a report by the ABC, Four Corners. Yes, sometimes they write stuff worth reading. Sometimes. The headline of this news report is Paedophiles Exploiting Australians' Broken Childcare System as Safeguards Crumble. Now, we can have debates, and we won't have it here, about whether or not the ABC's proposed solution of more government regulation will help things. But here's how it starts. So it says, paedophiles have infiltrated Australia's $22 billion childcare industry by exploiting lax regulation, piecemeal oversight, and glaring staffing inadequacies. A major Four Corners investigation has uncovered. The full scale of this crisis has been hidden until now. We have identified almost 150 childcare workers convicted, charged, or accused of sexual abuse and inappropriate conduct. Half of the 42 people convicted were sentenced in the past 5 years alone, and another 14 are currently before the courts. And what they're also saying is barely 15% of reports of child sexual abuse actually lead to charges, and 2% lead to conviction. So you're talking about possibly thousands of predators within the system. So yes, these are the professionals that your government says are best equipped to raise your children.
Now, can you see here that the first thing we spoke about, where you're not allowed to discriminate when it comes to sex, when you employ someone or when you create any business or anything, is a problem. This is a proper way to segregate people. It's like in the childcare industry, normally, if a man is very interested to look after infants,
And young
you
girls
should
and-
probably
yeah.
say no. I am opposed to the whole childcare industry as a whole, but if you're going to have it, then you should be discriminating when it comes to sex, when employing carers. That is a proper way to segregate. But because they're not allowed to segregate, Nathan, unfortunately, you have to put up with the abuse of your child.
Yeah, and before we went live, you actually had some interesting statistics, or at least general statistics. So you don't have the exact numbers, but you're saying who's the most likely to abuse a child?
Yeah.
Relationships
So
they have.
I think in Nancy, maybe it was not Nancy Pierce's book, but there's been some studies over the last year, not the last years, but the record shows that the person, and people are going to balk at this, and this can't be true, everybody knows, the person that's least likely to abuse a child is the biological father. And someone that is way higher in abusing children are the new boyfriend.
Yep.
Or the stepdad, the one that is not actually the father of the children. Now, funnily enough, in our society now, a lot of the time mothers tend to also do a lot of abusing, but not in the same way. So dads, or let's say men, tend to abuse children physically, like sexually or so on. But then obviously now we've have this massive uptick in the last 15 years of mothers abusing their children psychologically by convincing them that they're a different sex and then having body parts chopped off and so on. But that is just the reality, is that the biological father is actually the least likely person to abuse a child. And everybody, because we've been programmed this way, right? That's why we need to segregate men from women, is because men are so dangerous, they just want to abuse women and all these sorts of things. But when it comes to the family setup, that is actually not true. And therefore, who better to raise children than the family, the mother and the father of the child, instead of handing it off to someone that's unrelated, which is the point there. So if you look at
Yeah. Yep.
men that you don't even know, that are not even part of your family, wanting to look after your children, that is a major red flag. And you are probably, if you do go down that road, then I'm sorry to tell you that if your child does get abused, you should have known better right from the start.
Especially after a report like that. Like, if there's thousands of predators in these institutions, like, hello.
The thing is that's correct. However, I think if you ask your grandmother whether 50, 60 years ago she needed a report to tell her that it's dangerous to leave your 2-year-old daughter with a 40-year-old man that is very keen to look after her, I don't think she needed a scientific report or some sort of research thing for that to be uncovered.
But Sean, don't you see? She's not a professional.
Yes.
She
No, I know.
can't write a
I know.
report. See,
I know, but the Lord has
she's
given
not
us
credentialed. She's not a journalist.
That's it. So the Lord has given us these instincts, and when you're looking for a babysitter for your children, and you see the guy with the face tattoos and he rocks up with his motorcycle or whatever, versus a 16-year-old girl from your church, without speaking to either of them, you will probably go for the 16-year-old girl from your church. And that is discriminatory. I understand that, and I'm perfectly fine with it.
As a
Yes.
father of 4 girls.
Yeah, I don't care. I honestly don't care.
Yeah. Well, there are some further thoughts I've got here.
Oh, we weren't done.
No, we're not done. It's not just about the abuse that's happening, but as Erica Commissar, you may or may not have heard of her. She's heavily involved with the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. And just in the past week, she had an interview with John Anderson. That's on the John Anderson podcast. Well worth listening to. But she's saying even in ideal circumstances in childcare, it's an objectively bad thing to do for your children. Children need, and this has been, once again, we know this already, but it's been proven through studies as well, that children need a caregiver to help them through the first few years of life. Someone who's always there, helping them to regulate, helping them to learn how to deal with stress, to learn, all those sorts of things. What do you do when you cry? You hold a baby close. You comfort them. Whereas if you put them in childcare, you're putting them in a situation where as soon as one baby cries, there's stress in the room, all the babies are crying. And she says basically the part of the brain which was responsible for stress, it's sort of like the pancreas. It gives up if it's overexposed. So what tends to happen when kids are at childcare a lot is 3, 4, 5 years of life after that period, their ability to respond to stress is just gone. It's like the type of diabetes where your pancreas has just stopped working. And then the result of that is things like ADHD, where children, they just can't regulate because they've been exposed to way too much too early. They weren't equipped to handle it. It's not even about whether or not you've got pedophiles and whether or not you regulate things properly and put cameras in every corner and make sure that your childcare workers are above board. It's the simple fact that you putting children in childcare is setting up the next generation for failure. And we're seeing this.
I think
we're seeing this in our society.
We're all living in it. We're just trying to make it worse.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would just push back a little bit on that, just because the fact is you are going to have childcare.
Yeah.
Right? And the other fact is that it's probably not a bad idea to centralize that a little bit.
Really?
Like the idea of having your wife get together with her auntie or her sister and to look after the kids together, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
But not institutionalized. I think that's the thing.
Yes.
Childcare needs to happen.
So the thing is, the difference is not so much that we oppose childcare as a category, or even the idea of looking after kids together in the same space where one person is responsible for multiple families. It's just the question of who is regulating the relationships of trust
Yeah.
between those individuals.
And also, I think it needs to be appropriate for the age of the individual. So very young children do actually need much
Yep.
more
True.
personal care.
Yeah.
And we're talking like babies, infants, and toddlers.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, I just want to highlight this because the fact is, like for our people too, this is a major problem where you are in this constrained environment. You're in a suburban house. You are under financial pressure, especially if a young family. And now you have kids, right? And you have multiple kids. That's a hard problem to deal with if you're going to exclude the possibility of ever getting together to look after kids.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to maybe reframe that debate a little bit and say it's not so much that we're opposed to childcare as a thing. It's just we need to think about who is going to be responsible for this.
Yeah, I think it's more the institutional childcare.
Yeah.
That's more or less more the problem. If your wife with, as you say, her auntie or grandmother or whatever, or a couple of cousins or whatever, get together once or twice a week and have all the kids together there and whatever, that's not a problem. That's just, life.
Yeah.
That would actually be great if that would happen, because you're forming community building culture that way. Where what you're doing here in this way, where it's government instituted and regulate, well, the regulation part is not really the problem. The problem is that it's institutionalized.
Credentialed.
Yeah.
Professional.
If it's mom getting together with people that she trusts with her own children, that's a very different thing. Then you need no regulation, because now it's down to the individual saying, I would prefer that my children not get molested or abused. So who am I going to associate with?
And there's nobody better than the mother to make that call.
Yes.
If the mother is not a psychopath.
Yeah. There's always exceptions
There's
to the
always
rule.
exceptions,
But
which prove the rule.
yes,
Well,
yes.
unfortunately, there are a lot of
Yeah.
increasingly psychopathic
No,
people.
that's
so you
true.
just-
That's true.
And the problem is this is what the government is dealing with. So
Yeah. Well, you can argue about whether or not it's helping to fix things and what causes this psychopathy. Because a lot of the time, I think the message from the world is that, especially for women, in order to be successful, you need to do this and this and this and this, which goes against the grain.
Yeah.
But another topic. Okay. Now, I'm going to make this statement, and I'm more than happy to back it up, but I actually think Australia cannot afford to subsidise institutionalised childcare. You've already seen that it's a $22 billion hole in the budget. For context, the NDIS, which we talked about last time, was about $60 billion, and that's very concerning. And the changes which are being proposed are only going to make that more expensive, because more regulation means costs are higher. They're already struggling with not enough workers. So childcare centres, they're going to have to employ a whole lot more workers to meet regulations, which means, once again, costs are higher.
And that drives up the cost of living and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and we're already dealing with the issue of an ageing population where the number of people paying taxes is reducing. And we've got a productivity issue on our hands, and I'd say part of the reason for that is because we're employing people in unproductive jobs like childcare. Just a vicious circle.
We're in a situation now where the only way out of a situation like this is to make the difficult decision and then rip the Band-Aid off and go for it. That's all. It's gonna be pain for the first couple of years, but you just have to do it, and you have to just get rid of these things and say the best place for children is with their mum, and therefore we're now stopping all of this. No childcare subsidies, and we are going to look at other ways like family taxation instead of individual taxation or household taxation. Stuff like that to make it more affordable again for mum to stay home with the kids. So it's just one of those things where you just need to rip the Band-Aid off and just say, we need to stop this. But in order for you to do that, you first need to identify the problem correctly, and that we're not there yet.
Yeah. And look, we'll talk about ways in which you can help to subsidise families when we talk about family in one of the family episodes. So,
Anyway, that's probably enough for today.
Yes, it is. I was just going to finish with some conservative parties, People First, One Nation are good examples. They actually have policies where childcare payments are paid directly to the mother. and she chooses what to do with it. So she might pay for a carer, maybe a grandmother, or she might be like, cool, this can help subsidize my care for the child.
Or
I
buy
think-
alcohol, or buy,
Yeah.
and this is the problem.
Yeah,
with-
I don't like it because I don't think the government should be involved in these sorts of things.
Yep.
With wealth redistribution.
Yeah, just give a tax rebate and
Yeah.
never involve the government in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah. But although the thing with the tax rebate is that does mean you have more money in your hands as well.
Hey,
So people
I'm
would
not
argue it's the
complaining.
same outcome. Yeah. So there are a few parties who are pushing back. The coalition hasn't yet, but with Matt O'Sullivan has been appointed the
Yes, that's right.
Minister for Childcare. We talked
Mm.
about that previously. He's Christian, so he may well be ideologically aligned with us in terms of encouraging childcare to remain in the family as much as possible.
Let's hope so. Let's
Yeah.
hope and pray that he would have the backbone
Yep.
to say the thing that's going to be unpopular.
Yeah,
and
and just
push for
start
that.
banging that drum. The step one is just
Yep.
consistently say it is the best. It is best for the decisions relating to children to be made by the mother.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
just
And that's
keep-
also her responsibility before God.
Yes.
So we can call other mothers to account when they're failing in this regard, especially within the church. Yep, that's the way God's created it. And I think that shows as well in what we've been doing in family, talking about the household, talking about God's intention and how it's a beautiful thing.
I think maybe we should just rephrase that. I was just thinking about that because that was the whole argument with abortion on demand, right? Is that the decision is between the mother and her doctor. And I think we need to not forget the discussions we've had up to now is that it is up to the parents of the children to decide what to do. It's not the mom or the dad standing on their own completely.
True.
It is the dad that's ultimately responsible, but the child care, the way that a woman has been created, is mainly up to her, right? But she can't make a decision on her own to send the children to childcare or whatever. That should be in consultation with the father, and we need to encourage that mothers and fathers stay together and stay married.
love each other.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is related to a lot of other issues in terms of raising children,
Yep.
marriage, divorce, those sorts of things, but we won't get into it now. But I think, a good place to finish is always, look, God has created the family as a beautiful thing. He's intended it for the raising of children who learn from their parents. They take in the culture, and in our case, it's a Christian culture, especially for people who are Christians.
Mm.
They can learn these things. They can learn who God is. They can learn how to glorify Him, and that's God's intention. It's a beautiful thing. Like motherhood is beautiful. Children are beautiful, and I think it's good to end there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all for listening.
How about
Okay.
our social media stuff, Ben?
Social media.
Oh, well, normally we've got a
Yes.
like and subscribe.
Oh yes, take us home, Ben.
Yes, if you have not already, make sure you do hit that follow button on your podcast app of choice. Leave us a rating or review. And if you have any feedback or comments for us, rpackcounterpoint@gmail.com. Thank you.
And our prayer is that God's kingdom will come.